Teshbuchto ikoro da itioto kadishtomum shabohto. This is the 61st Maronite meditation, the 11th on Maronite history. It is desirable to point out that the basic facts of Maronite history until about 1500 and even later are in darkness, except for a few episodes where we have light. That is, Maronite history is not well attested until modern times. No continuous history of the Maronites can be written, covering all developments and all major figures. We are bound to jump from one topic to another and are unable to say anything about what happens in between, as it were. Maronite history is controversial. This controversy is partly due to the fact that there are so few sources for Maronite history from its beginning up until the last 200 years. For the very earliest periods, the few shreds of surviving evidence are often unclear, incomplete, and vigorously controverted. Although historians acknowledge that the sources are thin, they nonetheless try and fill them in as much as they can. Maronite history is especially controversial because people try to interpret the past in accordance with how they wish to think of the present and to see the future. They use history as a sort of gambit in a larger game of modern politics and ideology. We shall try and be impartial and not overstate the evidence in any direction or for any purpose. I shall avoid the practice of aiming personal criticisms at others. By far the most important book on early Maronite history is Peter L. Curie's Aramaic Catholicism. Let us commence with this 2018 article, very short but very good as an introduction. Theodora tells the story of Maroun, a 4th, 5th century anchorite who lived out of doors, consecrating to God a former pagan site near Cyrus in the province of Euphratensis and attracting numerous disciples. After Maroun's death, there was bitter competition to secure his relics. The successful village built a shrine and held a public festival for him. John Chrysostom wrote to a priest and monk called Maroun between 404-407, asking for prayers. In the 5th and 6th centuries, a monastery near Apamea, named after Maroun, played a leading part in advocating the Christology of the Council of Chalcedon. A letter of 517 from the Archimandrites of Apamea complains that Peter, the metropolitan bishop, and Severus, the Miaphysite Patriarch of Antioch, in office 511 to 518, had sent Isaurians to assault the monks. Like many Chalcedonians, the monks of Maroun accepted the doctrine of monothelitism promoted by the Emperor Heraclius as a compromise between Chalcedonian and Miaphysite positions. Monothelitism ascribes to Christ two natures, human and divine, but only one will and energy. The 6th Ecumenical Council, Constantinople 680 to 681, condemned monothelitism, but the Maronites were not present at the council and are not mentioned among the monothelites. From the 7th century onwards, they developed as a separate church, whether because they were isolated from the Greek world by being under Arab rule, or because as Chalcedonians they were distinct from their Miaphysite Syriac Orthodox neighbours. Certainly the Melkite Theodore Abu Qurra, died about 820, described the Maronites as distinct from both Miaphysites and Chalcedonians. The increasingly independent Maronite community required dedicated church officials, as the Patriarch of Antioch resided in Constantinople from 636 onwards, and between 702 and 742 no Patriarch of Antioch was appointed at all. John Maroun, died 707, was appointed the first Maronite Patriarch. Dionysius of Telmachre, died 845, is the earliest author to describe the Maronites as a separate community with a history going back to the late 6th century and headed in the 8th century by a patriarch, but he does not provide any details. The Maronites developed as a spiritual and military nation, settling in the Lebanese mountains for protection from Melkite and Miaphysite attack. Muslim persecutions in the 9th century forced the community to withdraw entirely, and the monastery at Apamea was destroyed in the 10th century. Al-Mas'udi died 956. In the Crusader period, the Maronites united themselves to the Church of Rome, eschewing monothelitism but retaining their distinctive Syriac liturgy. Two features of Maronite history continue to be much debated, namely their early historical origins and their stance in the Christological debates of late antiquity. This is a very good summary, although more can be said about it, and I think some of it is overgeneral. We now turn to St. Maroun. Ancient Seir, also known as Cyrus and Kurus in Syria, was founded in about 300 BC and was named after the city of Kurus in Macedonia. It was in northern Syria, not far from Aleppo and the modern Turkish border. The Bishop of Cyrus was present at the Council of Nicaea in 325. Theodoret was its bishop between about 423 and 458. We are almost totally reliant upon his history of the monks of Syria for Maroun. Theodoret is uneven in his treatment of the monks and aimed to relate what he had seen of these monks for himself or learnt from those who had themselves met the relevant monk. Unfortunately for us, it appears that Theodoret did not ever meet St. Maroun, and perhaps for this reason, commentators observe that Theodoret's brief account is very thin for such an important monk. St. Maroun is an enigma. He is important in Christian history. No other Catholic rite is, so far as I know, exclusively named after one person, yet little is known of what he said and did which made him so important, except for the essential points. We shall begin with the only biography of him, chapter 16 of Theodoret's writings on the holy hermits and monks of Syria. It reads, "After Kepsimus I will call to mind Maroun, for he adorned the godly troop of the holy ones. Maroun embraced life under the sky, taking for himself a certain hilltop which had long ago been honoured by the impious, and having dedicated to God the sacred precincts of the demons in that place, he passed all of his time there, pitching a small tent, but making little use of it. Maroun did not only employ the customary labours, but he conceived others also, gathering together the wealth of wisdom. The judge measured out grace for these labours, so richly did the munificent one grant to him the charism of healing, that Maroun's fame ran about everywhere, and everyone from everywhere was attracted, so that experience taught them the truth of the report. It was seen that fevers were quenched by the dew of his blessing, shuddering ceased and demons fled. Many and varied sufferings were cured by the one remedy. For the race of physicians applies to each illness the corresponding medicine, but the prayer of the holy ones is a common antidote to all pathologies. But Maroun healed more than bodily weaknesses alone. He also applied the bountiful cure for souls. He heals the greed of this man and the anger of that man. For one man, Maroun proffers the teaching which leads to self-control, while for another man, he bestows lessons in justice. He tempers the man of intemperance and arouses the sluggish. Farming in this wise, Maroun cultivated many crops for his wisdom. It was he who planted the paradise which now blooms in the land of Kuros. The great Jacobus, James, was a product of this cultivation. Of him and of all the others whom I shall recall individually with God's help, one could rightly apply the famous prophetic saying, The just man will flower like the palm tree and will be multiplied like a cedar in the Lebanon. Caring in this way for the garden of God, doctoring to both souls and bodies alike, he patiently suffered but a short illness. Maroun, teaching us the frailty of our nature and strength and commitment, withdrew himself from this life. Quarrelling broke out between the neighbours over his body, a violent quarrel. A populous bordering village came out in a body, scattered all of the others, and seized this most desired treasure. They built a great sacred enclosure, and even to this very day they reap the profit, honouring Maroun, the victory bearer, with a public feast. And even we, who are at a distance, reap his blessing, for it is not Maroun's tomb which contents us, but his memory. In addition, Theodoret mentions Maroun in some other places. In chapter 6 about Simeon, not Simon the Stylite. And this is summarising. Some Jews were travelling to a citadel which lay outside of our inhabited world. They lost their way in a storm and came upon Simeon in his cave. Simeon offered them guides to put them back on the right road and summoned 2 lions, who at Simeon's direction led the Jewish travellers back onto the road. Now this is a quote. But no one is to think the narrative is fabulous, for I have as witnesses to its truth those who are usually foes of the truth. Indeed, the very Jews who met with this good service continued to praise this act, and this was told to me by great Yakub himself, who stated that he had been present when Jewish travellers related the miracle to the divinely voiced Maroun. Theodoret then stresses that this was an instant where Jews witnessed a miracle wrought through a Christian. In chapter 21 on Yakub, in a summary, Yakub had been a companion of Maroun who had lived in a place once holy to the pagans and protected himself from the elements only by retiring to a tent made of hairy skins in rain or snow. In chapter 22 about Limnius, he says Limnius had been a pupil of Phalasius and then went to Maroun at the same time as Yakub, and after this, being eager for the life under the sky, took possession of another hilltop lying above the village of Targalla. Dwellings for the blind were built nearby. Limnius and James have completed their 38th year, meaning I think that they were still alive. And in chapter 24 about Zabinus, Zabinus was admired by Maroun, who advised all who visited him to obtain Zabinus' blessing. Maroun wished to be buried in Zabinus' grave. Chapter 30 mentions Maroun only to say that Domnina emulated his life. Price states that St. Maroun professed himself the disciple of Zabinus. However, this is not what the text says. Incidentally, as we have seen, Zabinus was also the name of a bishop of Antioch. It shows only that the name was not unique among Christians. Teshporto ikoro ta itioto kadisto on Shabbat.